Hi everybody, welcome back to the van build here, or the step van build. Just wanted to get a couple things out of the way as I'm walking over. I park up here on the corner so that I can get full solar where we're working at a little shade, and with all the electronics on my bus it does bother her. So, in fact, I turn off my cell phone as I walk over. So a couple things I wanted to clear up real quick is that this is not a how to do it. Everybody, every EHS person has a different levels of problem. So this is a how we are doing it. There's we make some choices along the way that other people may want to do some a little different than what we're doing, or want to do some extra shielding or whatever. But so here I am back at the van, and let me go through this a little. Hey, well, the first thing we did was get in here and scrub this down. It's got what, 22 years of bread and dirt and whatever grease coming in here. So we got some nice citrus-based cleaner, scrub this all down, floors, everything, and got it cleaned out. You would not believe the amount of grease that was up in this area up here. Anyway, so that's all cleaned up. We did discover something nice. Is you see how the wheel well over there, and there is no door on the driver's side, but standard is where there would have been. So there was the option of having a door or not have a door. They chose to not have a door. That is going to be our battery compartment. It's perfect. It's close to the engine. One of the choices is not have solar. So we are going to, she's going to do a lot of charging with the a battery isolator system. The actual battery itself is right here next to the doorstep. So we've only got a little ways to go, and we're keeping, at this point, the idea is to keep all of the AC current up in here. So we can put an inverter down in here, run the cables over to the battery, and or the batteries, and have a charging station and a place. So let's say she wants to use a blender or a hair dryer, is she can come up here, turn a switch on to turn the inverter on, plug it in, stand outside away from most of that power, and or have the blender. Well, we're going to build a wooden, or I'm going to build a wooden case here, so there'll be a storage compartment, blender, Vitamix, whatever, and all that right there. So so that's that plan. Okay, I still got to build all this stuff. So what I'm starting at is starting back here in the back. Gonna put down 1-inch insulation on the floor and then plywood on top of it. You wonder why I cut a sheet in half, so this comes out 2 feet. That way when I put the plywood in, it'll be out in here, and there won't, the gaps or where the edges are of the plywood, other than up against the wheel wells, will not match up to the insulation. So I'm going to do that, and once I get the floor down, then I can start playing with the ceiling, or and or the walls. So that's where we are right now, and I'm going to try to get this floor down today. You probably noticed me moving around. This Reflectix is going to go up. One of the debates and the compromises that we made at this point was this ceiling is aluminum sheeting. Those of you who have school buses, this is very similar to what's under the window above the chair rail. It's not real thick. Above that is probably an inch of fiberglass, and then the roof. Roof on this, turns out, is one giant piece of sheet of plastic. It's one solid piece. Nice. Only riveted around the sides. We are going to still paint that at some point. But the debate was tear this down, leave it up. Cover it with flashing was one idea. And what we've decided to do is put up Reflectix, and then because I do have this much of a gap, it's going to be a 2-inch Reflectix, 2-inch foam, and then 1-inch foil-faced foam. So the Reflectix is, because it's aluminum coated, that is one shielding barrier, actually two because it's on both sides. Follow with a foam, follow with a 1/2-inch foil-faced foam, which is another 2 layers. So we're going to end up with 1, 2, 3, 5 layers of metal up here. On the walls, it's going to be 3 levels, plus we've got another thing to go. So let me get working on the floor. And once I get that in, then we can, should be able to come in here with some blue painter's tape, and we can start playing around with layout ideas, because that's sort of, as usual, in flux. So here we go. All right, so I got the 2-inch or the 2-foot piece here, and turns out it's like 42.5 or so inches from here to there. If I had been a little bit smarter, I would have put a 4-foot piece there and down, but it is what it is. And it's still 18 feet minus a couple of 2x4s. So not a major problem. Cutting the foam to size, this is that 1-inch. I got a razor knife, straight edge, and I scored it by lining the straight edge, or the cut part, up with the edge of the work table. And once it's scored, it'll snap right off. And then I got to cut it to length. Now, one thing I learned from Aaron's build last winter, for those who've been following along my travels, these blue squares are not accurate. If you're doing drywall, 1/16 of an inch isn't going to matter. You're going to cover it up with tape. But if you're doing precision work, don't trust these. They are off. Thank you, Fritz. Those things are off by, I think it was a 1/16 of an inch. So for cabinetry, I use it as a straight edge, but I don't use it as a square. I think part of this is to make the shielding as good as possible. Building a wall here and another one in the back. Of course, that one's to close in the back. This one I'm using 2x3s because it's an interior, basically it's an interior wall. That's an exterior wall. Doing 2x4s, we can insulate it a little bit better. So I got to have those down in place to get my measurements right for the plywood and stuff. Well, coming from there back to this piece is a little shy of 5 feet. So I think what I'm going to do, because I want a full sheet of plywood in the back and I want a full sheet of plywood in the front, I'm going to put that 2-foot piece in here, because I got to jog around over here where the slide for the door is. I'm going to put that 2-foot piece here in the back. Let's see how that works out, because I'm going to go obviously full sheet. It makes it about there. So those are fine. And then the next one, middle of that, and I'll do a full sheet here, and yeah. So it's where I'm gonna have a narrower piece. I want it to be up in here somewhere. Maybe the best spot is going to be here, because it will be covered up with a lot of couch on this side and cabinetry on that side. At least that's sort of the plan right now. So you gotta, as you're going along, you gotta try to think ahead as to where things are going to go. So let me bring that 2-foot piece up here, and I got to trim it around that frame, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so you get into a situation like this, where this piece is going to be hitting this and coming out a couple inches. Now I could go and measure the distance and the depth and all that, but a real easy way to do this is to lay it in place along here, make a mark for that edge, and move it over here and make a mark for that edge, and take your square down. This square which is a framing square, very handy to have in a build, is square. So I can take and lay it out on the two marks I made. And then easy peasy. It's got little pieces to pick up, and because these are getting tucked underneath the these ribs, what I can do with this is just, what's nice is it's flexible enough that I can bend it, and there we go. Now I just got to cut a piece to fit this section and in between the wheel wells, and we'll move on from there. So I'm sure some of you are wondering about the R value. This is 1 inch. So in the floor, we're going to have an R value of 5. All right. When I do the ceiling, we're going to 2 inch. It's going to have R value of 10 with the green board, and then I'm adding in another 3 with some foil faced 1/2 inch, and then the Reflectix. So in the ceiling, it's going to have around a 15. 5 on the floor, 15 in the ceiling. The walls are going to have the 2 inch, which is the 10, and the same stuff. So it's going to be about 15 in the walls and ceiling, and 5, an R value of 5 in the floor. And at this point, you'll notice that there is, other than where there's going to be a wall in the front and a wall in the back, there is no framing. There's a big debate on a lot of the schoolie groups and stuff, and I just want to show you. I weigh 214 pounds, and so if I'm standing on 1 foot, all 214 pounds is in that, what, 40 square inch, because my feet are about 10 inches by average 4 inches wide. Let's say they're 3 inches wide, then I've got 214 pounds pushing down on 30 square inches. And I want you to notice when I get off, you can't even tell other than my footprint that it was there. That scuff mark doesn't count, that was there. If I get down on my knee, notice flat, one knee, all of my weight on one knee, and it just dimples it a little bit. It doesn't totally crush it. Now keep in mind that there's going to be plywood on here. So the plywood is going to spread that weight out over a larger area. So that's why I say you do not have to frame the floor. And the cabinetry we put in is going to be attached to the plywood on the walls, stuff that, or better yet, into the 3x3s that I'm attaching to all these ribs over here. Okay? Down to the floor. You put a stove in here. A regular household stove, if you want to go that route. And it's on 4 quarter size legs. on the plywood, spreads that weight out. Stove doesn't weigh as much as me. And remember, this little dimple right there, pencil across, you can see it's like at the deepest point, maybe 1/8 of an inch. And that's me on the foam. You don't need to frame. You're doing a schoolie, a van, all that. You put foam on the floor, cover it with plywood. You do not need to frame it. It's a waste of wood, and wood, the R value of wood is way less than this foam. Remember, this foam is what did I say, 5? This is 1 inch, I'm adding a 1/2 inch, so a 2x4 or 2x2, they're not really 2 inches thick. They're 1.5 inches thick. I think the R value on that is something like 2. I'm guessing, but it's worse than foam with the plywood. And the plywood's going to add a little bit. And then, of course, whatever we put down on flooring is going to add more. So that's just my thoughts. If you want to disagree with me, no problem. You can put it in the comments. Explain to me why. The one thing I don't want to hear is that my brother, father, uncle, grandfather, myself have been a carpenter. I've built tons of houses. You always frame the floor. Well, yeah, in a house. In a house, the framing in the floor keeps you from falling into the basement. It's what holds the floor up. In this case, in a vehicle, I've got a solid aluminum floor. In a bus, I got a solid steel floor. That's what's going to hold the floor up. That's what keeps you from falling through, is the fact that you have a floor. You're just adding to it. So, just my thoughts. Hopefully, people can point at this. I mean, I'm always explaining this. So, now I get to the fun part of cutting plywood to cover all this foam. But before I cover it with it, I am going to take this aluminum tape and tape off the cracks between the foam. Mainly because, you always spill water. It happens. And if the plywood crack between the boards is here and it runs underneath, you don't want to go underneath. It's not gonna, on aluminum, it's not going to rust. Takes forever for aluminum to corrode, but it's, you don't want puddles of water underneath your floor. And it's not like, this stuff doesn't grow mold, but that water is going to be taking something with it. So, doesn't cost much. This thing comes in like 50-yard rolls, so I doubt I'm going to have to buy any more. And this is way better than, say, duct tape. It's sticky on the back once you get it started, which, here we go. So I can just take and stick one end down, and then as I go, just smooth it out and be pulling this along behind it. So let me get all that taped, and then we'll get to the plywood. One of the first things I did was set up a work table behind the van. It's nice having a place to work, in and out, not a lot of walking. Big flat table. So you saw me cutting the foam on this. Now, this is just OSB, nothing special. But that is my sacrificial table. And by that, what I mean is I can take and set the depth of this saw As soon as I find the, oh, there it is. Been a while. So I take and set the depth of this saw to just the thickness of this plywood, which in this case is a 1/2 inch, plus just a smidge, just a little bit. That way when I cut, I'm cutting all the way through this and just a little bit into the sacrificial table underneath. In the end, we're going to throw that away, but in the meantime, it gives me a nice flat surface. When I'm cutting the plywood up, it's not going to break. If I'm cutting, you know, a wider piece, you don't have the weight, you don't need a second person hanging on to it. So I could just take this, line it up on the cut, and you can see it's cut through, and just because I set it up just right, it just barely touches this below. So, pro tip, nice way to do it. There's other ways. I happen to like this one. An OSB, I think it was like 20 bucks plus the sawhorses, which I'll reuse. So for $20, the end of this process, it can be used other places, or because it's all torn up, thrown away.